Okay, I'm recording the review so that you all have access to it over the weekend so that you will study, just in case you forget that it's there. Whenever I remind you, I sent you Remind 101, you will have access to it then, yes? Very first thing, standard form is y is equal to a parenthesis x minus h quantity squared plus k. That is vertex form. Your goal is to put all of your equations in this format the majority of the test, okay? I am giving you this vertex, -1, 2, and a point, -10, -6. Find the equation. So, what do we know whenever we're given the vertex? What do we label the vertex? HK. So that's the very first thing you are going to do. So this is going to be H, and this is going to be K. What does that leave the ordered pair, -10, -6 to be?
A and X.
X and Y. X and Y, yes? So from here, I'm going to have y is equal to a parenthesis x minus h squared plus k. I plug in what I know. I know y is -6, a I don't know, x is -10, minus h, which is -1 squared, and k is 2. Yes? Okay, from there, we're going to go ahead and say a double negative creates a positive, so -6 is equal to, this right here is going to give me a -9. What is -9 squared? 81a plus 2. Now what? Subtract 2. So if I subtract 2, I'm going to get -8 is equal to 81a. Then, how do I solve for a?
Divide by 81.
Divide by 81. This is irreducible, so we leave it as is. However, that is not my final answer, because my final answer is the vertex form of that equation, yes? So, my answer will be y is equal to a, which is -8 over 81, parenthesis, x minus h, which is going to be a -1, making that a plus, squared, and then plus 2. This is your final answer. Does that make sense, yes or no? We plug in the vertex, and we plug in a, and that is your final answer. Okay? That will be on the test. That will be on the test. Questions?
Wait. This is 81 divided by 8.
I am taking and dividing both sides by 81. Yes. You good? Any other questions? Okay. Next, it says find the vertex of the parabola and the x-intercepts by completing the square or factoring. I am telling you can do this either way. Obviously, you want to work smarter rather than harder, correct?
Yes.
Eyes on me. Are we all paying attention, working on our other homework after the review? Okay? So what do I do first? I need to look at this thing and I need to ask myself, which one is easier, completing the square or factoring? Factoring is always your go-to. It takes less time every single time. So you're going to say, okay, can I factor this thing? Well, I'm going to put it in two binomials and break down x squared into x and x. Factors of 1? 1 and 1. I need to have a positive one, so that's plus plus or minus minus. How do I know which one to use?
Because of the plus.
Look at the middle sign, so that has to be plus plus, meaning this is actually x plus 1 quantity squared. That is f of x. Meaning this and this are equivalent.
That the x is equal
So
to
my question is up, down, left, right, stretch, compress, reflect, what is happening to this function?
stretching by 1. Well,
One's not a stretch and one is not a compress, so there is no compression or stretch on this problem, yes? So what is the only thing happening to this problem?
the left one.
It's going to the left 1 unit, which means my vertex is going to be what, folks?
0.
Left means -1. I'm not going up or down, so that is going to be my vertex. The ordered pair, -1, 0, which is the vertex, doubles as what else? How do I graph this? If I go over 1 point, is this opening up or is it opening down? It's opening up. What else is it? It's a minimum. What else is it? Read the directions again. Find the vertex of the parabola. Did that. And the x-intercept. It is also the x-intercept. And this is what we call a double root. It is touching the x-axis at one spot, and it's not going through the x-axis, but rather turning around and going right back up the way it was. So this means my x-intercept is going to be x equals -1 2 times. Why? Because it is a double root. It is a double root. Do we understand that? So -1 0 not only goes as the vertex, but also the x-intercept. I will have this on the test where you are able to factor instead of wasting your time by completing the square. Do we all understand that? You need to be cognizant of it, and you need to watch for it. Yes? Questions? Next. Find the vertex of the parabola and the x-intercepts by completing the square or by factoring. Do you think you're going to be able to factor that? Absolutely not. So what are you forced to do? You are going to be forced to complete the square, which means I am going to go ahead and put this to 0, and then what am I going to do? Take that 14 over the other side. Yes? Then what? Nope. This 2/3 has got to go away. That 2/3 is my stretch or compress factor. In this situation, it would be my compress factor. And I have got to pull that out. So I'm going to factor that value out. Whenever you factor that out, 2/3 divided by 2/3 gives you an x squared. Then your brain needs to understand that you're taking 8 and dividing it by 2/3. So I keep, I change, and I flip. Yes? 8 divided by 2 is a 4. 4 times 3 is 12. So that's going to be a 12x inside there. Does everybody understand what I did there? From this point, what do I do?
Would you add the 14 back over there? 36
I have to do sidebar from here. My sidebar is whenever I'm going to be taking my b divided by 2 squared value. What is b in this problem? It is 12, so I'm going to take 12 divided by 2, which is 6, squared is 36. Where am I adding the 36 to?
Inside the parentheses.
Inside the parentheses. So this is going to give me a 2/3 parenthesis x squared plus 12x plus a 36 inside. What have I actually added to the right-hand side?
2/3
Very good. This 2/3 is attached to the parentheses. So I drop 36 on the inside, which means I'm actually dropping 2/3 times 36. Do we all understand that? You cannot forget that. Okay? Next. This right here is going to give you a 12. 12 times 2 is going to give you a 24. What is 24 minus 14? Now, if you are confused, what should you do immediately? Should you do all of that calculation? No, you should come over here to Desmos and you should allow yourself to say, hey, I need a second with my brain. 2 divided by 3 times 36 and then minus 14. And it's going to give you that 10. So if you are freaked out about doing those calculations in your head and you want to type them into Desmos or use your calculator, please do so. You will not hurt my feelings in the least, yes? Okay, so now we know that we have that. So now I'm going to keep going and having 2/3 here. Those 3 terms are going to turn into what?
Binomial.
What binomial squared?
X plus 6
X plus 6 squared. Very good. Now it says it wants vertex form, so what am I going to do? I'm going to subtract the 10, so f of x is equal to 2/3 parenthesis x plus 6 squared minus a 10. This is vertex form. Now I want to know, what is happening to this parabola? Compressed 2/3, left 6, and down 10. So that leaves me a vertex to be what, folks? -6, -10. So let's do a quick sketch of that. So if I'm at -6 and -10, that puts me here. Am I opening up or am I opening down? I am opening up, which means, do you physically see it cross the x-axis? Yes. So before I move on, what should you guys all do? You are going to come over here to Desmos, especially since you're taking a test, and you are going to graph the original problem. The original problem was going to be 2 divided by 3, x squared, plus 8x plus 14. And there's the original problem. Yes? Then I'm going to come down here and do 2 divided by 3, parenthesis x plus 6 squared, and then this is going to be minus a 10. And hit enter. Are they indeed the same? They are. So I'm going to come down here, I'm going to check my vertex. Is that what I said my vertex was? -6, -10. Yes, so now I'm going to be looking at these lovely x-intercepts. What can you conclude about those x-intercepts? They're probably irrational. Does that make sense? Which means I'm looking for some type of a radical as my answer. So I come back over here, and I'm going to simply do, from this point, I am going to solve for x. So how do I get rid of the 2/3? I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal, which is 3 over 2. Well, 3 times 10 is 30 divided by 2 is 15. And that's going to be x plus 6 quantity squared. Now, how do I get rid of the power of 2? Take the square root. When you take the square root of both sides, what must you put in front of it?
Plus or minus.
So I have plus or minus the square root of 15 is equal to x plus 6. Are there any perfect square factors of 15? No, so I cannot simplify the square root of 15 any further. Do you all understand that? Okay, so how do I solve for x here?
Subtract 6.
So -6 plus or minus the square root of 15 is equal to x. So what are my x-intercepts? -6 plus the square root of 15, comma 0, and -6 minus the square root of 15, comma 0. Yes? So I'm going to come back over to Desmos, and I am going to simply check my calculations. So I have -6 plus the square root of 15, and I hit enter. And then I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to delete the plus and make that a minus. And I can come back over to Desmos, clicking these points and checking that those decimals are exactly what they should be. Do we understand that, yes or no? It's on the test. You need to know how to deal with those fractions. You need to know how to check to make sure that you are right. And you need to be effective and be able to move quickly through the test. You must be confident in this. If you do not know how to do this, you need to redo worksheets 2.1, worksheet 1, and 2.1 worksheet 2. Yes? Super important. All right, the next thing. Find the vertex of the parabola and the x-intercepts by completing the square. Same concept. So if we do this problem right here, same exact thing. This is 0. What do I do next? Subtract the 4. What do I do next? Pull a 3 out. When you pull out a 3, what operation are you doing? Division. 3 divided by 3 is a 1x squared. 9 divided by 3 is? Minus 3x. What do I do next? Sidebar. So if I'm doing sidebar, that means I'm going to be taking my b value and dividing it by 2 and squaring it. What is b currently? It is going to be 3. 3 divided by 2, I can't simplify that, but I sure can square it. What is 3 divided by 2 squared? 3 squared is? 9. 2 squared is?
4.
So that's 9/4. Where does 9/4 go? It is going to go inside the parentheses, so I have 3 parentheses, x squared minus 3x plus a 9/4 quantity. What am I actually adding to the right-hand side?
3 times 9.
I am actually adding 3 times the 9/4. Yes? Do we all see that, yes or no? Are we all good, yay or nay? Yep.
How come you don't take a negative sign for your sign?
Because whenever you square it, what will happen anyway? It becomes positive. So the negative sign is irrelevant. You're going to use that negative sign whenever you go to make it the perfect square. Make sense? Okay. All right, so now with that being said, at this point, we are going to go ahead and go over to Desmos, and we are going to put that left-hand side in. That left-hand side is going to be 3 times 9 divided by 4. Oopsie. What was it? 3 times 9 divided by 4, and then minus 4, was it?
Yeah.
And I'm going to change that decimal to a fraction, and that's 11/4. So that whole thing turns into 11/4 is equal to 3, and then what does that trinomial turn into? What does that trinomial turn into?
X minus 3/2.
I drop down the x, I drop down the sign, I take b divided by 2, which is 3/2 quantity squared. Yes? I need vertex form, so what do? I'm going to take that over, so I have f of x is equal to 3 parentheses x minus 3/2 quantity squared minus 11/4. This, ladies and gentlemen, is vertex form. What is happening to this parabola?
It's going right.
Stretch 3, right 3/2, down 11/4, which means my vertex is going to be what? Positive 3/2, negative 11/4, which means if I do a quick sketch, I'm at positive 3/2, down here to negative 11/4. Am I opening up or down? I am not reflected, so that means I'm automatically opening up. What can you conclude? There are x-intercepts that are real. They do cross the x-axis. So at this point, I freeze and I go back over to Desmos, and what do? I am going to check this, and I'm going to put in the original problem, and the original problem was 3x raised to the second power minus 9x plus 4. That's the original function. Now I'm going to put in what I got, which is 3 parentheses x minus 3 divided by 2 squared minus,
It's not working for you.
nope, it's not working for me. Thank you. And then what was it?
11/4.
Positive or negative? 11/4. So they are the same. I check this. Yep, that's good. And I come over here and I check these, and you can clearly tell that they are crossing. So I come back over here and I have to solve. And I'm solving it from right here, folks. Yes? So how do I go about that? How do I get rid of this 3? When you divide by 3, what are you multiplying by? You're multiplying by 1/3. So I'm going to multiply by 1/3. This 3 and that 3 goes away, and I'm left with 11/12 is equal to an x minus 3/2 quantity squared. Yes? Now how do I get rid of?
Square root.
Thank you. I'm going to square root both sides. So I'm going to square root the top and the bottom. Yes? So that gives me plus or minus the square root of 11 all over. This is the square root of 12, and I'm just going to go ahead and we should probably break this down first. What are the perfect square factors of 12?
3 and 4.
3 times 4, right? So this pops out as a 2, so I'm left with plus or minus the square root of 11 over 2 square roots of 3. I don't care about the 2, but I do care about that square root of 3. So how do I get rid of that square root of 3?
Multiply the top and bottom by it.
Yes. Now, notice that that's just 1, so I didn't have to do to the left side and the right side. I only had to go to the right side, the left side, and do that. Okay? So this is plus or minus the square root of 33 over that 3 and that 3 pop out to give me just 3, which is a 6 now, is equal to x minus a 3/2. Yes? Now, how do I get rid of that 3/2? We add that to both sides. So I have 3/2 plus or minus the square root of 33 over 6 is equal to x. Don't like this. Why don't I like that? They're different denominators. So what do I multiply 2 by to get a denominator of 6?
3.
So I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom by that. So that gives me a 9 plus or minus the square root of 33 over 6 is equal to x. Those are my x-intercepts. How do I confirm that what I did was right? Come back over to Desmos, and I'm going to have a 9 plus the square root of 33, all divided by 6. Nope. And hit enter. I'm going to copy this jazz, come down here, put the plus sign, turn that to a minus, and then I'm going to check that these actually are those same decimals, and guess what? They are. Do we understand that, yes or no? Yes.
So if you didn't put it in the 6, like just the 3 over 2.
You could have kept it as the 3 over 2. I would prefer to have that 6 so that it looks a little bit nicer, but at the same time, I'm probably not going to count off for that. Okay? All right. Do we understand this problem, yay or nay?
Yay.
It was ugly, but we get it. All right, make sure you're with me, guys. Here we go. Next one. It says find a polynomial with the given zeros. When it says to find the polynomial with the given zeros, what does that mean?
So x equals 0, x.
We're going backwards. So x is equal to 0,
X is equal to 3.
x is equal to 3, and x is equal to -7. So x equals 0 is still the same. Bring that 3 over by subtracting it, and bring the 7 over by adding it. Yes? So now we're going to do what with all 3 of those things? We're going to multiply them all together. So I have an x times an x minus a 3 times an x plus a 7. Yes? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. So you can go ahead. I'm going to keep this x out here. I'm going to FOIL these. Okay, so that's going to give me an x squared plus a 7x minus 3x minus 21. I FOILed these two.
Okay.
I FOILed those two. Yes? I'm going to combine like terms. 7x minus 3x is a 4x. And then lastly, what do you think I should do?
You should distribute.
Distribute x cubed plus 4x squared minus 21x. Know it. It's on the test. You need to be able to do it. Okay? That is an easy one. Okay? What would a more difficult one look like? A more difficult one is this one right here. Yes?
I like these.
So, how do we do this? We say x is equal to 2 plus the square root of 5, and then x is equal to 2 minus the square root of 5. How do I bring the 2 over on the left-hand side? I'm going to subtract it. In the same way with this, I'm going to subtract it. Then your brain should recognize that the left-hand side of each of these equations are what?
The same.
The same. So we're going to marry them, making this equal to an x minus 2 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 5. Now, plus or minus the square root of 5 was happening by taking the square root. So what's the opposite of a square root?
Seniors, please report to the cafeteria for a game assembly.
All right, so the square root, how do I get rid of it?
Did you go down there and square that?
Square both sides, yes? So if I square both sides, this is going to give me an x minus a 2 quantity squared is equal to power and root cancel out, a 5. Now, if you want vertex form, you could literally just subtract the 5 over and be in vertex form, yes? However, I am going to want you, as well as MathXL is going to want you, to FOIL that out and subtract that 5 over. So that's going to be x squared minus 2x plus a 4 minus a 5. Combine like terms, x squared minus 4x minus 1 is equal to 0, and that right there is going to be our lovely little polynomial with those 2 roots. It is on the test, people. You have to make sure you understand how to do it with the square roots. Yes? Can we do it?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, that brings us to our next topic, which is determine the zeros of the following functions algebraically and the multiplicity of each. So I'm telling you, you can check it graphically, but I expect to see algebra here. Yes? I expect to see some factoring into two binomials if at all possible. So the very first thing you're going to do is what here?
You're going to pull out the x column 0.
Make that 0, and then pull out the GCF, which is going to be an x in this situation. So that's going to be a 9x squared minus x divided by x is a 1. What do I do next?
You're gonna
Factor that into two binomials, if at all possible. Keeping the x, factors of 9 are going to be 3x and 3x. Factors of 1 are 1 and 1. I need a negative outcome, so my signs must be opposite. Yes? Do we understand? Okay, so then you are going to have x equals 0, and then 3x plus 1 is equal to 0, so that means 3x is equal to negative 1, and x is equal to negative 1/3. And then 3x minus 1 is equal to 0, so 3x is equal to 1, and x is equal to 1/3. So those are the 3 x-intercepts, yes? Do we understand that? Okay? Now, what are my multiplicities? The multiplicity of this is 1. The multiplicity of this is 1. The multiplicity of this is 1. Because they are not the same number. Do we all understand that? If you had x is equal to 1/3 and x is equal to 1/3, that would be a double root, and multiplicity would be 2. Keep in mind, the highest exponent determines how many zeros you should have. Yes? And when it is a double root, what happens to the graph?
doesn't it not like go through, but
It touches it, but it does not go through to the other side of the x-axis, and it goes right back up. So when you are comparing and looking at the graph, you have that information to be able to go off of. Any questions over that? Okay, next, describe the behavior of the left and right-hand side and determine the zeros of the function graphically or algebraically. Stay with me, please. Stay with me.
wouldn't you put it into two binomials first?
I would not. It's asking for the left and the right-hand behavior. That's what it's asking for.
What is that?
That's the leading coefficient test.
Okay.
So that is what it's asking you to do, is to find what the degree is. Well, if you were to FOIL this, this is going to go into that. So that would be an x squared right there. And then you would be taking this 3 with that x squared and turning that into what power?
5.
X to the 5th. So what your brain needs to know is that this is an x to the 5th function. With it being an x to the 5th function, so now we know this is an x to the 5th problem, which means I know that this is going to look like what function?
X to the third.
It's going to look like x to the 3rd, but what is the leading coefficient of this overall function? Negative 1/5. So what is it going to look like? Negative x cubed, yes? Which means this thing is going to have the left-hand side doing what? Is going to rise, and then the right-hand side is going to what? Fall. Do we understand that, yes or no?
How do you know that again?
Because the leading coefficient is negative, and since it's negative, it's reflected over the y-axis here, so that's why it's going to go up on the left and down on the right. Yes? Okay, then it says determine the zeros. All right, well, that's a little bit more stuff going on. We know it's going to be degree 5, yes? So I should have 5 zeros. So I'm going to have x is equal, x is equal, x is equal, x is equal, and x is equal. Yes? There should be 5. Now this right here tells me that that is an x cubed. What is that x cubed technically equal to? Well, if I get rid of this, I make it equal to 0. That means x cubed is equal to 0. That means I have 0 3 times.
Why is x cubed equal to 0?
Because if I were to replace f of x with 0, if this is already in factored form, this whole thing is in factored form already. So since it's already in factored form, I simply need to set each parenthesis and GCF equal to 0. The GCF in this problem is x cubed, which means x cubed has to equal to 0. Well, that means it's x times x times x, which means 3 x's are going to be 0. Does that make sense? And then the next thing that your brain needs to know is that x minus 7 squared is equal to 0. So that means x minus 7 is equal to 0 2 times. Yes? So x is equal to 7, x is equal to 7. That means that is a double root. Does that make sense? So what do I expect to see on your paper?
Double root.
X equals 0, multiplicity, 3. X equals 7, multiplicity, 2. Do we understand that?
Question.
What I need to have on this problem is this and this. Yes, sir. Was that what the question was? Okay? Because it said determine the zeros of the function graphically or algebraically, and to also tell what the left and right hand behaviors are. Does that make sense? Okay? All right, so what is on the test? Part A test. Match the following graphs with the correct equations. You may not use a graphing calculator or Desmos. This is just like problems 1 through 8 on page 95, which was 2-2 book work,
Where we match them?
where you match them. You will use the leading coefficient test as well as anything else to your brain to be able to match them appropriately. Yes? Okay? No calculator or Desmos will be allowed. Okay? Then, I want to make sure you know how, it should be in the bottom tray. I want to make sure that you know how to complete the square on this. Everybody's eyes up here, everybody paying attention fully. Do I have your undivided attention? I need you to complete the square on this formula. So what's the first step I should do? Subtract the c. So I have ax squared plus bx is equal to negative c. Then what? Pull out the a. When you pull out the a, what operation are you doing? So a divided by a is a 1x squared. B divided by a is ba times x is equal to negative c. Then what? Sidebar. So I'm going to take my b value and divide it by 2. What is b? B over a. And I'm going to divide that by 2. Notice how I write that horizontally? When you divide by a number, you are actually multiplying by its reciprocal, so that's a keep, change, flip. So this is going to give me a b over a 2a, and I'm squaring that. So if I square that, what is that going to give me? If I go to this one, that gives me a b squared. If I go to the bottom, there are 2 terms in the bottom, so 2a times 2a gives you 4a squared. Where am I adding that? Inside the parentheses, yes? So I'm going to have a parenthesis x squared plus b over a squared, or I should b over ax, plus a b squared over a 4a squared, all is equal to negative c plus, what am I adding?
A times a squared or b squared.
Yes. Okay. This a hangs out, and these 3 terms are going to turn into what? Drop the x, drop the plus, and what is b divided by 2? That is b over 2a, quantity squared. Then I have a negative c plus this a, and this a squared goes away and becomes just an a, so that's a b squared over a 4a. Does everybody see that? Put the c over 1. What is my LCD between 1 and 4a? 4a, right? So this I'm going to drop down. And this is going to be 4a, negative 4ac over 4a, plus b squared over 4a. Yes? Write that as one fraction. And I'm going to make that b squared minus 4ac all over 4a. Anybody seeing it yet? No one sees it yet?
Isn't the b on this side going to cancel that b out?
Not yet. How do I get rid of this a? When you divide by a, what are you multiplying by? 1 over a. So that goes away, and I'm left with x plus b over 2a quantity squared is equal to b squared minus 4ac all over 4a squared. Now what? You're not wrong, Michael. Proud of you. What do I do now? What do I do? I'm solving for x. I'm solving for x.
Square root it.
Square root. So this cancels out. I'm left with x plus b over 2a is equal to plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over. The square root of 4 is 2. The square root of a squared is a. Now what? Subtract b over 2a. So x is equal to negative b over 2a plus or minus b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Do you see I have the same denominator? So write it as 1, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. What is that? This is the quadratic formula that we came up with by completing the square. I strongly, strongly encourage you to memorize it. I strongly encourage you to memorize it, and I challenge you to effectively do it by yourself.
Hey, take a picture.
When is the test?
Monday.
The test is Monday. Be prepared. Know what you're doing. Make sure that you are studying. I have sent a Remind 101 to remind you and prepare you for the test. You must study 2-1 worksheet 1, 2-1 worksheet 2, 2-2 book work, 2-2 worksheet 1, and 2-1-2 Math Excel. There are 5 homework assignments for your class preparedness grade. If your homework is not complete, you will not have extended time to finish the test. Be sure all homework is completed. Questions, comments, or concerns? Wonderful. Test Monday. The rest of the period is yours to finish any and all homework assignments.